Okay, folks, thank you so much for joining me. I think we've got about 8, 9, maybe 10 people on the call tonight. And if you're watching this online afterwards, this is a presentation to some folks that we get together once a month just to help and support each other in the capacity of being our most healthy self. My name is Mike Thomas. I'm a National Board Certified Health and Wellness Coach, and my contact information is on the screen. You can email me at mike@wlscoaching.net if you have any questions, comments, or concerns, and then that's my web address as well. So this is really a presentation on using, and I think I've shared it on the next slide here, using positive emotion, specifically gratitude and positivity, to help you change your mood, which then could potentially help you change your actions, or actually to take action itself. So before we get started, I want you, everybody on the call, or maybe anybody that's listening in, to think about yourself personally, right? What is it that is your personal gap? And we all have them. I have several gaps. I want to be doing this, but I'm not quite doing that at all, or to a little bit, or what have you, right? So in the beginning of this, I want you to think about that personal gap, and I want you to be thinking about what I talk about on this presentation. And if you feel like that resonates with you, where you potentially, it could help and support you in the capacity of making change to be on track to your goals, etc. Right? So does everybody on the call have a good idea what I mean by your personal gap as it relates to where you are now versus where you'd like to be?
Mike, I have a quick question.
Sure.
I'm deaf in the highest decibels, and I'm trying to hear you. Are you saying gap or gaff?
Yeah, great question. So GAP is in Paul, so gap.
Okay.
Right. So, and can you guys see the presentation?
No.
Yeah. I can't think about your personal gap.
So if you're looking at your phone, Bev, if you swipe left or right, you may be able to see it.
Okay. Got it. Thanks.
Got it. No, you're welcome. No problem. Can everybody hear me okay, though?
Yes.
Okay.
I can.
Cool.
Yes, I can.
All
Do
right.
you mean personal goals or physical goals, or?
Yeah, great question. So you know, a lot of times with a lot of my clients and a lot of people on this call, a lot of times you talk about movement, or you'll talk about, you know, I really want to start eating more healthy. I want to start eating more plants, right? And in fact, I want to be an 8 out of 10 in plant-based eating. But where you're at today is maybe a 4 out of 10, because it's maybe every once in a while it's a breakfast and sometimes it's a dinner. And the gap, of course, is between 4 and 8. There's a gap there where you are right now. Oh, I'm not executing to the level that I feel like I need to. And that's what I mean by the gap. So it could be related to food. It could be related to movement. It could be related to any number of things, specifically that relates to your own health and wellness. Is that helpful?
Mm-hmm.
Cool. All right. So I want you to think about your own personal gap, if you could. And I think that's going to be relevant on the call. So this is kind of the second part of the call that we had last month. And I wanted just to give a real quick recap of what we talked about last month. And there's going to be a couple of links that I'm going to have in the description when I post this in the YouTube. When you click on it, you'll be able to see in the description, there's going to be 2 links. One of the links is going to be the video that we had last month in our call. The other link is going to be, I'll talk about it later, but a particular presentation that somebody gives that I think is very, very powerful, that also talks about and discusses this working with your mind, changing your thinking, etc. So on last month's call, we talked about no easy street, you know, so you get to retirement, you win the prize, you get your promotion, you're voted most popular, whatever those things are. You know, I think sometimes we're in the mindset, at least I know I have been, where, okay, good, now I can just kind of be on cruise control and I don't have to put more effort into whatever it is that I want to accomplish. And I think that I shared with everybody, and I think we went back and forth in agreement that unfortunately, there's really no such thing, and maybe it's fortunately, there's really no such thing as no easy street. The reality is there's nothing like that. We're always working. We're always trying to strive to be better in the capacity, because you're, as the last line there says, we should always be trying to move forward. We're either green and growing, which is ideal in my opinion, or we're ripe and rotting. And that's right out of Jim Rohn's. He talks about that a lot. We never really truly stay the same. So we talked about those two things on our last call. We also talked about problems and how problems are an opportunity for us to grow through those problems and those challenges. And I gave the metaphor of buffaloes versus cows in the meadow, and what buffaloes do when the storm comes versus what cows do. And the last thing I talked about, or want to share with you that I talked about, is the pain of discipline versus the pain of regret. You know, the pain of discipline does take effort. There is some pain there, just like in life in general, but it's significantly less compared to the pain of regret. So we talked about that the last time. So one thing that most of us might have heard before is that mood follows action, right? So I'm not a therapist. I'm not a licensed therapist. I'm not treating depression. I don't want to give that perception. But the reality is, and many of us probably know this, that, you know, I'm just going to use working out, but it doesn't have to be working out. It could be making a whole food plant-based meal, right? What typically happens is you have some type of spark that gets your hiney at the gym to work out. Even when you don't necessarily want to, but you do, and you work out. And after you do, you feel much better. You're so proud of yourself. You did that movement, whether that was making the actual meal or you actually worked out or what have you. I think, again, I'm not a therapist, I'm not an expert there, but I would wholeheartedly agree with that when I get on the treadmill in the morning, there's many times that I really don't want to get on the treadmill, but I just do it anyway. And then I'm just so glad that I did, or even in the middle of it, as I've got the sweat going and I'm just feeling so much better. Mood follows action. This presentation today is about not having the spark to even make the movement, right? To even start to make the plant-based meal, or even start to reach out to friends for social connections, or even start to put the gym clothes on to go to the gym, right? This is about working internally between your ears to help and support yourself without the action itself, right? So we all know this. It's probably, I know for me, this has happened many times in my life. Many people on this call that have shared with me during coaching calls, same thing. This is what we do, right? We make this, I'm going to do this. I'm excited. I'm fired up. I've got this goal and we are excited. We're motivated. We've got the willpower, but then whether that's a few weeks or a few months, we're maybe not as excited, or we have distractions or whatever that is. And for some reason we stop what we're doing that, you know, and I can say we're working out at the gym and, you know, 5 days a week for the first few weeks. And then, well, something happens and it's 3 days a week. And then, you know, six weeks, 8 weeks, 12 weeks later, you know, it's maybe 1 day a week. And then all of a sudden it doesn't happen at all. Right. So there's lots of reasons why we stop going to the gym or making plant-based meals, right? So I'd like to ask you guys the question, what are just some of those possible reasons why we stop doing those kinds of things? What do you think?
Time.
Yeah, we
Time
run out of
commitment.
time. Yeah,
We get in a rut of doing the same thing over and over and we get bored.
there you go. So we're bored, we get in a rut.
Other things happen in life or pop up that,
Yeah, life happens, right?
yeah.
Yeah. Okay, what else?
Sometimes actual pain.
Pain, okay.
Yeah. Mhm.
Why else do we stop?
Sometimes your mood changes and you don't even know why.
Yeah, so you just don't feel like it, right?
Right.
Okay. Anything else come to mind of why we stop?
We get busy.
Yep,
Yeah.
get busy.
You don't feel well and then you get out of the routine probably.
Mhm.
Yeah, physically not feeling well, either having pain or just not feeling well. So here's some of the ones that I have. So time, we get in a rut, we get bored and we don't feel like it because we're bored. Life happens, which if we're all alive, guess what? It's going to happen to all of us. Sometimes we maybe are working out and we start feeling pain and then we slow down and we have to stop. Our mood changes. And I think Joanne said, and we don't even necessarily know why our mood changes sometimes. We're not as motivated. We don't feel like it, right? We get busy with the distractions of life or whatever. or we just actually physically don't feel well. So I think those are all very relevant. I think we probably all can really relate to that, right? So I want you to think about a sustainable change that you have struggled to make, and could be similar to what I talked about as far as the gap goes, right? So I'm curious, what specifically happened to cause that struggle? And it could be very similar to what you guys just said. So we may have already answered that, but throw out some things to the specifics of what happened, or maybe somebody can just share with the group if you feel comfortable. Here's kind of over the course of about 30 to 60 seconds, here's my struggle to make this sustainable change. Why don't we try that?
This is very simplistic, but you know, I am not self-motivated to exercise. I never have been in my whole life. And so when I do it, and I do find things that I enjoy, maybe, you know, but a lot of times it's an outdoor thing, and it's weather dependent. But just like, to go to the gym, and for me to go back to the Y, like this month, I just literally have to drag myself. I am not I know I need to do it, and I'd like to do it, to be strong and all that.
Right.
But, there's nothing inside of me going, oh, let's go.
Right. Great. That's perfect. That's a perfect example of something that you need to be doing for so many reasons, right? Health-wise, there's just so many incredible benefits from consistently having movement, but you don't really want to, right? There's just not the motivation there. So there's the ambivalence of knowing what you need to be doing, but not necessarily having the motivation to doing it, right? So great example. So what if we can change our mood, right? What if it's possible to say, Claire, thank you for sharing that. You know what? Claire feels a 2 out of 10 in going to work out today, right? Maybe it's a 1 out of 10, right? Just not really motivated. She's not in the mood. She just doesn't want to do it, etc. What if we had the choice and we had the power to be able to change our thoughts and then change our mood, right? Just kind of think about that. I don't know if you guys can see this entire slide. My screen is kind of messed up here. Let me look here.
I can see it, I think.
Yeah, it's just not fitting into my screen perfectly. But I heard this, actually, I was in Florida last week and I saw it on the wall, but I've heard it before, and many of you have probably heard this as well, right? So it's the story, or the fable of the story of the 2 wolves. And I'll just read it to you real quick. One evening, an old Cherokee told his grandson about the battle that goes on inside people, right? He said, "My son, the battle is between 2 wolves. The battle is between 2 wolves inside all of us. One is evil. It is angry, envious, jealousy. It has sorrow, regret, greed, arrogance, self-pity, guilt." So there's a lot here, huh? Resentment, inferiority, lies, false pride, superiority, and ego. So that's the wolf. That's the, let's just say, evil wolf. The other wolf is good. It is joy, peace, love, hope, serenity, humility, kindness, benevolence, empathy, generosity, truth, compassion, and faith. The grandson thought for a minute about it, and then asked his grandfather, "Well, which wolf wins?" Of which the old Cherokee simply replied, "The one that you feed." Okay. So really, this presentation, the premise of this presentation is exactly that. How can we feed that wolf specifically with positivity and gratitude, and leverage those 2 things that we have in our life, or we could have in our lives, to help us and support us, right? So the thing that I want to share with you guys just about myself personally, and some of you kind of know this because we go back and forth, and quite frankly, probably we get a little bit too personal sometimes with each of our lives on some of our calls. My apologies. But, you know, over the course of probably the last 3 or 4 months, I have, and I'm in a much better place now, but I've really struggled to what I would call the negative voice, right? And that's my term that's on this screen. But I will tell you that I've also read 4 different books, some of which several times, and they've called this negative voice. One of them calls it the resistance. One of it calls it the gremlin. One of them calls it part X, and one of it calls it the saboteur. And I'm quite frankly, there's probably several books out there, and maybe you guys know some of those as well, where they have a term for this negativity or this negative voice that's inside of yourself, or let's just say the bad wolf, right? So on one hand, it's comforting to me to know that I'm not by myself. And now people are writing, there's books about these things and how can we work to mitigate or minimize those or what have you. And it gives me hope. And on the other hand, it's actually given me some tools, some of which I'm sharing indirectly through this presentation to help get out in front of this. Right. So I think it's very real. This is something that's really happening in all of our heads to a certain degree. That's just my thought. And I think the first step, which I've shared this with some of you on the call, is having the awareness, right? I think my own sense of self-awareness is growing, but I feel like I've got a long way to go. And the reason I say that is because I would have these negative thoughts. And in all seriousness, I'm not talking about suicide or anything like that, but I'm just depression and just negativity. I mean, people know my mom is very ill. And so I would literally ruminate and think about what's going on with mom, and it would all be very, very negative, right? So I would catch myself after 15 or 20 minutes while I'm doing the dishes and my mind is just going, right? And I would catch myself. And me, being me, unfortunately, I would then judge myself for having the negative thought. Of course, let's just throw some gasoline in that fire, which would also put me in further negative state, right? So fortunately, I can laugh about it today, but this is something that really brought me a lot of frustration and consternation, because I'd like to think of myself as a very healthy person. I'm doing the running, I'm doing the meditation, I'm eating well, and I was really struggling, right? Really struggling with depression and just frustration of feeling these negativities. So a lot of the bad wolf, some of those literally adjectives, insecurities, anxiety, all that stuff was going on inside of my head. And I will tell you that today I'm in a much better place. I'm certainly not where I want to be, but I'm so much better, and that gap is significantly less. So having the awareness is the first step as it relates to what's going on with this voice, if you will. Step 2 is actually intentionally, and this pretty much sums up the presentation, work to change your thoughts. In this presentation, we're going to leverage the 2 positive emotions of positivity and gratitude. But before we go there, I guess I would just ask you guys these things: the resistance, the gremlin, part X, the saboteur, the negative voice. Who has the power to control your thoughts?
You do.
Okay. Anybody else?
Well, sometimes you think it's other people or situations because they'll do something or say something that annoys you and
Yeah.
let you right there. So it's easy to blame other.
Okay. So potentially you think other people potentially could as well, right?
Well, at least in my mind, yes.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Anybody else?
I think my coworkers, specifically because I spend most of my day with my coworkers. So if they say something, or if there's like a certain action or a certain meeting, and it could really affect my thinking and affect the rest of my day.
Yeah, absolutely. Anybody else that has the power to control your thoughts, do you think?
Hi, baby.
So,
I don't think of anything.
okay. So here's the deal on this slide. Okay. So you get to be right. Okay. And what I mean by that is, Helen, great example. The coworker, somebody's going to say something that's going to frustrate you, that it's going to upset you. you get to be right and say that, yeah, this person is going to upset me. But you also get to be right if you change your mind and say, actually, it's going to be me that's going to control whether I get upset or not. Right. So I'm not trying to be tongue in cheek. I'm not trying to joke around about it. But the reality is, it's what you say. If you say the devil controls my thoughts, well, guess what? You're giving that power and that control to somebody else. If you say, nobody controls my thoughts except for my spouse, because that person is really close to me. And therefore, I could say that that would probably be, for most people, a little bit more difficult, but you still have the power and the control. Right? But you can decide specifically if you have that power control or not. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
So just think about that as we talk a little bit about both the bad wolf and the good wolf, right? Understand that negative thoughts, unfortunately, are significantly more impactful on us as human beings than positive thoughts. And there's lots of theories why that is. I don't want to really get into that, but that's reality. You know, unfortunately, the pain hurts a heck of a lot more than the win feels good, but it is what it is. And some people say, well, you should try to have more positive interactions, 3-to-1 to negative interactions, so you can balance that out. And that may be the case as well.
That's you. I'll turn it down.
But what you can do is have the awareness of what's going on when those negative things happen, and then have the forethought to say, I'm going to take some action. And that action is what we're going to talk about as it relates to feeding the good wolf, right? Leveraging positive thoughts and positivity. And we get into some of the granular pieces of this in just a minute, or gratitude to improve your mood. And the reason I say that is, I think it's a good example. Again, Claire, she wakes up, just like Joanne said, sometimes you don't even know, but you're just not in a good mood. Maybe you had a bad dream and you don't remember it. Sometimes in the middle of the day, I just start feeling bad about something and I don't know why. That's just, those things happen. I think the chances of somebody Claire to go work out, again, I'm just going to use Claire, of a 3 out of 10 or a 2 out of 10 is significantly less than if she's feeling better, because now she feels like she's a 5 out of 10, right? The goal of this presentation is to share with you what I think we all have, which is agency. We have control and things, utility, hopefully things that you feel like you can use to help and support you to make progress on what it is that you want to actually be doing. And my thought is, if you can, in some form or fashion, what's going on between the ears, put yourself in a place, a state, an emotional mood or state that supports you and lifts yourself up. Again, we're not talking about a 9 or a 10 out of 10, but we're just going to move and make progress on that feeling to help and support you to say, you know what, at least I'm going to go walk a mile. I know I was going to walk 3, but at least you're going to start taking action because your mood is elevated. And that's really the premise of this presentation today. So lifting our mood using both positivity and gratitude. So tool number 1 is leveraging positivity. And really the tool is all about avoiding the negative. I am 50, I think about this for a minute here, I'm 57 years old. And I would say for 57 years, there's things that I've been doing and saying and thinking for 57 years, right? So I'm actually talking about changing some things up, some things that are very hardwired in my brain with those neural pathways. And I want you to think about that yourself as well. You know, we have certain patterns and certain routines that we fall into. What can we do to, in some form or fashion, avoid the negative because we happen to feel negative about a certain situation or what have you? And all that is happening to us probably several times throughout the day. And what can we do to avoid that negative? So when bad things happen, right, avoiding the negative, and I just put some examples on here. So you got a bad boss and the boss says something to you that really upsets you, or you get a bad diagnosis, which is very real, right, for a lot of the folks on the call. Or let's say you have a setback when you're trying to hit one of your goals and you're getting ready to talk to your coach and you're really not in a good place emotionally, right? So those are all very relevant. What else comes to mind as maybe a bad thing that could potentially put you into a negative place? What do you think?
Weather.
The weather? Okay.
if it's cold and rainy and nasty out and
Yeah.
I think about going out and working out, it just don't settle too well.
Absolutely. That's a really good one.
Weather affects me greatly sometimes, and then I like to walk outside, and if it's nasty and cold like it has been all winter, it really puts a kibosh on my walking outside.
Perfect example. Thank you so much for sharing. What else comes to mind?
When there's a gut punch for something like somebody that you care about, something's bad that's happened to them.
Okay. Yeah. It takes you off guard. Exactly.
Yes. Yeah.
So great examples. And so we typically have negative thoughts. Sometimes, and I put in all cap letters, a lot of negative thoughts, right? Sometimes we're not even aware of it. We're not conscious of what's going on in our head, what's going on between our ears. And this gut punch, let's just say that Bev talked about, later on in the day, we're thinking about it. And guess what? We're in a negative place. And then later on in the week, we're thinking about it. Sometimes months and years later, we're thinking about it. And not only thinking about it, but we're also in a probably not very positive place. We're in a very negative place.
Reacted to it. Yeah.
Right, exactly. So the goal with the first tool is to don't repeatedly go there, having the awareness and changing your thoughts. Now, this could be construed as having denial, and that's not what I'm saying, right? I do not have denial about the fact that my mom is dying and probably will be dying here in the next few months, right? She's got colon cancer. Many of you know that. So that's sad, certainly, and it makes me feel sad. But when I catch myself feeling sad about that, I'm not denying that when I say, but I'm so grateful that I have my sister, right? I'm so grateful that my mom's not in any pain. Believe it or not, I mean, she's got cancer. It's going all over her body. And the doctor's like, are you sure not any pain? No pain at all. And I'm grateful for the time we have. So I shift, which isn't always easy to do, but I'm not in denial about that this happened. And I think this presentation could potentially, people could be thinking, oh, I guess you just ignore things that are bad. That's not what I'm saying. I'm talking about what you're doing with your emotional state, right? If you're going to grieve because you got that gut punch, grieve. That's a natural part of the process of emotional feeling, etc. What I'm saying is, let's not grieve for the whole week or the whole year or years later, right? Let's put ourselves about what we can do. You know, that guy that cut you off in traffic, and then all day you told everybody at work about this jerk that cut you off in traffic. This is something that I have done
Spread your
times in my
negativity,
life,
yeah.
right?
Oh, yeah.
So if my goal here is to help and support you to stop thinking negatively, the reality is it's actually impossible to not think about something, right? That's actually impossible. For example, if I told you guys to not think about pink elephants, and I went on and on for 30 or 45 seconds about pink elephants are something that we are not going to be thinking about. We're not going to be focusing on pink elephants. Pink elephants are really, really bad. And I would tell you, please do not think about those, right? Well, of course, everybody, including if you're looking at your screen, is thinking about pink elephants, even though I've told you not to think about it. And the reality is you cannot think about the reverse of an idea, but there's a trick or there's a possibility. And that is, instead of when you catch yourself thinking about the guy that cut you off in traffic or the frustration that you feel about him, etc., when you catch yourself, remember awareness to shift your thinking. Not to say, oh, I know I'm not supposed to be thinking negatively about that guy. I just went to church on Sunday and then I said this on Sunday afternoon. No, instead, shift your thinking of what you want to be thinking about instead. So pay attention to what you're thinking about and ask yourself, is your thinking helping you to accomplish your goals, helping you to live the life that you want to live? If not, change your thoughts, right? And where I wasn't doing so good a few months ago, as I told you my story, no judgment, right? Recognize, have the awareness, and shift gears. And as you work on this, which I've been doing for, as I've shared with some of you, probably for a few months now, as you work on this, it becomes easier. And the benefit that I have experienced and that I've been reading about is the mood that changes. It's like, oh my goodness, this is like a little bit of a lifeline as relates to helping and supporting me with what I want to do to lift my mood, right? So lifting our mood and thinking about, well, I know I shouldn't be thinking about that driver, or I shouldn't be thinking about that gut punch because I'm done with that. It's been a week and a half. What can we do?
Yeah.
So you could shift your thoughts to what brings your joy. Several of the books that I've read about talk about what good can you take out of this quote unquote bad thing, that gut punch, right? And that's kind of where I'm at with my mom as it relates to, again, I'm going to be very sad when she passes away. It's going to be upsetting. Everybody says, you know, you never can prepare for it. And I get it. And I know that, and that's true. But what can I take good out of what's going on right now with my mom? And there's a lot, right? And that's what I'm going to the best of my ability, focus on the good. And I shared some of that with you, you know, with what's going on with my sister, the support that both she and I have from our spouses, phenomenal, right? The fact that she's not in any pain, I can't emphasize it enough. I'm incredibly grateful for that. And the time that we have together, it's very, very precious. She's 83 in May, if she makes it to May. But this is very, very precious time that we have little of, right? So the reality is that's what I'm going to focus on as it relates to my mom, instead of, which I was doing for quite some time, feeling sorry about the situation, feeling sorry for myself, just being very, very sad and putting myself in that bad negative state, if you will. So,
And
so
Coach Mike,
yes.
just a reminder, what's your mom's name?
Her name is Helen.
Right. Yeah.
She's got a great name, Helen.
Just for the team's awareness here.
Yeah, that's a good point. Thank you so much, Helen, for bringing that to
Yeah,
everybody's
absolutely.
attention.
That brings me joy that her name's
As
Helen.
it should. All right. So any questions about tool number 1, where we talk about lifting your mood, changing your thoughts, switching gears, I guess, if you will, maybe looking for the good. Any questions or comments about that?
Think of anything.
Pretty good. All right. So tool number 2 is very similar, but it's just leveraging the positive emotion of gratitude. And we call this as tools number 1, and tool number 2 is feeding the good wolf, right? That person, inside, that thing inside of our heads, what we can do. And it's pretty straightforward, but it's really about intentionally daily practice of gratitude, or when you have that thought, to shift gears to gratitude, like I talked about with my mom, right? But one of the books I thought it was really interesting, and I didn't get it until I started doing it, was to dig for the little stuff, right? So if you would ask me, hey, Mike, what are you grateful for? Well, right away, my wife, my kids, of course, these things are incredibly important to me. I'm so grateful for that. You know, I can go down the line there with all the big stuff. And that's what I call the big stuff. But it's this book I was reading said, please do the little stuff. In fact, do the little stuff before the big stuff, because even though I do take my kids and my wife for granted sometimes in my life, those things I do feel pretty grateful for. And I feel that feeling on an ongoing basis. But the little stuff, right? The little stuff, like I got in my car today and it started. And as silly as that sounds, there's thousands of people in just America today that got in their car and it did not start, right? I'm in a house that has heat. I have shelter. And maybe that's not so little, right? But I recognize how I'm like, oh my gosh, there's so many things that I have that I don't think about that I'm incredibly grateful for, right? I think, knock on wood, I'm in reasonably good shape and I can run. I have, you know, a business where I coach people, which I'm incredibly grateful for. So that's probably a big thing. But there's so much in my life that is little and big. But the little stuff really helped, it resonated with me to see how just the feeling of gratitude really came forth, because it was just so many things that I started to think about that were quote unquote little stuff that I was taking for granted, and it helped me to recognize that and see that, right? So I'd like to ask you guys in this moment right now, thinking about big stuff or little stuff, why don't we just share for just a few minutes, just some things, just throw it out there, things that you feel like that you're grateful for. What do you think?
The opportunity to work with this group and with you, and to have a support system through that.
Great. Fantastic. Thank you for sharing.
Did you tell her to say that, Coach Mike?
It cost me a lot of money. Not only did I tell her, but I paid her.
Yeah, you planted that question for sure.
Yeah.
Mike, I would like to say that I'm grateful for the technology that allows us to meet
Yeah.
from all over the country,
Yeah.
you know, in our own places, in the comforts of our own surroundings, and yet hear, you know, everybody's collective wisdom.
Yeah. Great. Thank you so much, John. Appreciate that. What else are we grateful for?
I have a couple vacations coming up, so I'm grateful for the opportunity to take a break from work and to unplug from my daily job to
Wonderful.
relax a little bit.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Anybody
Just-
else?
The basic things that we have in our lives. I mean, the basic, many people don't have just basic food, water, you know, those are,
Yeah.
like you mentioned those before, kind of. So
Yeah.
the basic little things that we take for granted all the time.
Yeah. Absolutely. Anybody else?
The first thing I thought was waking up the next day and having another day
Yeah.
of opportunity
Yes.
to begin or continue. You know, thank
Yeah.
God, another day.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Last weekend, as in 10 days ago or whatever it was, I was fortunate to be in Florida with some friends, and I was on an e-bike. I don't know if you guys know what e-bikes are, but it's basically a bike with a little electronic motor, so you can pedal and it'll help you a little bit. And I mean, to Bev's point, I was like so grateful to be on this bike. It was in the 60s, by the way, the temperature. We went by water. It was a blue sky. I could see. I mean, I could feel. It was just like, wow, this is so great. And I know that had I not been going through the intentionality of being grateful, that I still would have enjoyed it. But it was just, that moment was just so precious to me because I was experiencing that. So, yeah, you know.
Until you went over the handlebars.
Yeah. Well, you know, honestly, coming away from that, yeah, so I wrecked. I went over the handlebars. Coming away from that situation, that could have been I'm very grateful because that could have been a very serious thing. And I'm okay, fortunately. I mean, I hit my head. I think I broke my rib. Anyway, it's all fine.
But for the lesson learned.
Hopefully I learned from that, right?
Yeah.
But I like to, and some of this I shared with some of you guys, but I like to tell you a real quick story about gratitude, and it deals with quote unquote the little stuff. So there is a video that I saw probably about 4 or 5 years ago, and you know, quite frankly, the reason that I eat plants mostly, not 100%, but mostly, is because I thought at one time, literally thought I was going to die of heart disease. And a lot of you know my story. My mom, her side of the family, real bad heart disease. A lot of my great uncles died or had open heart surgery in the 40s and the 50s. So this is pretty much my lifeline. And fortunately, I'm in a much better place today, both physically and emotionally. And I saw this video about 3 or 4 years ago as I was learning more about this. And it was Dr. Greger. And some of you may know who Dr. Greger is, but he's a big time plant-based doctor. And he's got some amazing books out there. And he was talking to somebody that was in the process of starting to make the change for themselves. And he was standing face to face with this guy. Dr. Greger is about 6 foot. This guy's about 6'5", big, heavy guy. And he was struggling because he was going to have to potentially get a toe removed because he was struggling with diabetes, et cetera. And he says to the guy, he says, you know, here's the good news. You know how to fix this. You're not in stage 4 cancer where you're going to die in 6 months. You have the answers to the test. And when he said that, it was just like, oh my God, that really resonated with me, where, you know, that person that's in their deathbed and they're dying and they have nothing they can do about it. That's kind of where I was. So the gratitude that I feel, and I promise this is not a commercial on plant-based eating, but the gratitude that I feel for feeling like, oh my God, I don't have to wait until I have a heart attack to go through the process of potentially making that change. Again, going through that's probably not such a little thing, but it's not something that I really thought about until I saw that video. So being intentional with gratitude is incredibly important. Again, you can do this proactively. I shared this with some of you. When I go to bed at night, I close my eyes and I just think about 3 or 4, maybe 5 little things throughout the day that I'm just so grateful for. And I'm trying to be in the habit of doing that in the morning when I wake up as well. But taking the time in the day to bundle that. You can do a gratitude journal, and I'm sure a lot of you have heard of that. And I was doing that, but every time I'd write in the gratitude journal, I'd write 5 things, and 4 of them were my 3 kids and my wife. And I'm like, maybe not as impactful because it's happening on an ongoing basis. But like I said, you can, every day, most of us are brushing our teeth at least once a day. And when you brush your teeth, you can bundle that with, you know what, I'm going to be thinking about something that I'm really grateful for. Even the smaller, the better. If you're standing up while you're brushing your teeth, hey, you know what? I'm actually standing up. I'm not in a wheelchair, right? I'm able to stand up.
And I have teeth.
What's that?
I have teeth to brush.
Potentially, if there's, yeah, exactly. Then there's teeth there that you can actually brush. Exactly. So
Yeah.
you can pair those things together. And then just building the habits of doing this over the course of time could help with the mood. I know it certainly has been for me because I've just seen that and I felt it. I've done some of the work and I felt it and I noticed the change. To Joanne's point, sometimes I'll just wake up and I'm just not in a good mood. I'm like a 2 out of 10 and I have which is extremely frustrating. I have no idea why, right? And I'm like, okay, well, I don't feel good. I'm not in a good mood. I have no idea why, which makes me even that much more frustrated. So it's happening less and less. And I think that one of the biggest reasons is because of what I'm doing to try to be intentional with gratitude. So, all right. So giving you complete transparency, this is very simple to understand, but it's not necessarily going to be easy, right? It does take effort. You have to take responsibilities for the thoughts that you're thinking. And if you say, well, the thoughts that I'm thinking are, well, because of my coworkers or because of whoever, then you're basically giving up that responsibility and you're giving up that ownership. And that's your choice. You actually have that choice. Like we had that slide earlier today. Obviously, having the responsibility comes with great responsibility as well. But to move those thoughts into the circuitry that brings you peace, that brings you joy, that elevates your mood. You have to be intentional. You have to build awareness so you catch yourself if you're in the process of having those negative thoughts or trying to lay the groundwork for a great, healthy day. And then have an experimental mindset, right? And basically what this means is I'm going to try this and we're going to see if it helps me. It may or it may not. And sometimes if it doesn't, that doesn't necessarily mean it doesn't work, but maybe you just have to continue to do it for a little while. But if you do it as an experiment, the chances are that your susceptibility to it is significantly greater because it's just an experiment that you're doing that you're going to give a shot for the time and see if it works for you. So I think this is maybe the second to last slide. So this is the other link that I'm going to put on here, which is a TED talk that this woman did, right? Dr. Jill Bolt-Taylor. I don't know if you guys know who this is, but so she actually had, so she's a neurologist or a brain surgery or a PhD, and she's a very smart woman. I think she was at Harvard teaching neurology, and she actually had a stroke in her brain. And this stroke in her brain, which took her almost 10 years to recover from, it actually slowed down. It was the left side of the brain where the stroke was, which is the cognitive functioning and the thinking and the forward thinking and the executive planning and stuff. It closed down and shut down all that extra chatter that I guess, if you will, the saboteur or the negative voice in her. So her right brain, which was all about presence and being in the moment, was there to prosper. And so how can you do this without having a stroke, right? Because the goal isn't to have a stroke so you can have the joy that she experienced. So she's fully recovered and she's got an amazing TED talk. I think it's got several million views on it. And she's also got some pretty amazing books that I'm excited about reading as well. But her quote is, when you pay attention to what is going on in your own brain and you take responsibility for the circuitry that you are running, you make the rules of a new game or life, if you will, right? Again, easier said than done, but a very powerful statement. So as I mentioned before, this is simple to understand, but not necessarily easy to do. And the last thing I'm just going to ask, because this is the second to last slide, is this: what could this look like of leveraging the emotions of positivity or gratitude to apply to you? What do you guys think?
It'll make you feel better.
Mhm. Tell me about that.
It would keep you in a good mood, like moving forward.
Mhm.
Because when you get negative, then you just start thinking negative about everything.
Yeah. So your mood is elevated, and does that help in any other way, or you just feel better, or what are your thoughts on that?
Well, it gives you more energy when you're in a better mood.
Okay,
You can go forward with some
great.
of the things you got to do that day, whether it be exercising or cooking a good meal.
Absolutely.
Because when you're negative, a lot of times you go to candy or cake or
Oh, yeah.
something that you shouldn't be eating.
Right. Yeah. I think most
It
probably.
puts you in charge. Yeah.
Tell me about
Well,
that, Beth.
rather than letting those negative feelings and emotions and whatever
Mhm.
get into your thinking, it
Yeah.
just allows you to change it and be in charge of what you really want to be or how you want to be.
Yeah. You have that ownership.
Right. You have the choice and the ability to do it. Really do it.
And when you do that and you have that ownership, how do you feel about that? And you recognize that you can.
Well, then I think you recognize that if it is to be, it is up to me and it can be done, and it's doable, and it's not as difficult as you think it's going to be.
Cool.
I don't know. That's sort of rambling.
Not at all.
I think for
Anybody else?
myself, I try to really look at what I'm going through and then try to tell myself there's always someone that has it worse.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
And
That's
I feel like maybe that kind of grounds me a little bit, like, okay, you don't have it as bad as you think you do.
Mhm. Yeah, what a fantastic way to reframe it.
I think being intentional
Mhm.
can also help you drive the positivity. If you approach a situation with the intention of doing good or putting yourself in a better place, maybe is a better word.
Yeah.
I think that can really help with regards to becoming more positive as
Yeah.
far as how you approach life.
That's awesome. Thank you for sharing that.
it's kind of also, this is sort of kind of what I already said, but not only does it put you in charge, but it gives a sense of power that's beyond just choice. And it also drives, well, success breeds success and failure breeds failure. And it's kind of like a cycle that can be broken.
Right.
So, and you have that option and you have that ability to actually break that cycle.
Yeah. It's very empowering.
Yes.
And I also think that you can just, and you know, I used this particularly when I was working, make it till you make it. You're not feeling it at all. You're not happy to be at work. The people are annoying, but just forcing yourself to smile and be pleasant. You know, it really does, you know, help bring you up as well. Instead of just thinking, ugh,
Yeah.
you know, so, you know, and now it's a term like my daughter and her friends used to use with different stuff, like fake it till you make it. Just have the confidence, I'm happy, well, you know, and then, you know, you might kick yourself up a couple notches just because you're smiling and not responding, you know, negatively and not paying attention to negative talk.
Love it. Fantastic. Thank you for sharing that.
That's a good one. Yeah.
Anybody else? All right. Well, listen, guys, I really appreciate it. Like I mentioned before, feel free to reach out. I'd love to know if you feel like this is worth your time, you want feedback, you want a different topic or what have you. Ultimately, again, the purpose of these calls is to help and support each other in the capacity of making sustainable change. So we're making a real difference in our lives and health and wellness, both physically and emotionally. All right, I will close it out. but it's been great. Thank you guys so much. I don't have no idea how you did that. So,
Thank you. I'm just playing.
all right.
All right. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you,
Bye.
Mike.
Thank you so
Bye,
much. You
thank
got- Take
you.
care.
Thanks, Coach Mike.
Thanks,
Yeah.
Mike.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.